Hi everybody, it's Kathy from Huckleberry Herbs and Art. I'm working on some bookmarks for my pansies, or I'm going to make some bookmarks with my pansies on them, because I'm starting with the Created By stamp on the back. It's something that I always seem to leave for last and then almost forget. So I started with full 12 by 12s, 6 by 2, and that means you can get 12 of them from a 12 by 12 cardstock. And using acrylic white paint, I find that the sponge brush is really best because you can pat it down. When you put the paint on, you want to attempt to just create a flat surface. And as it is paint and not ink, it gets stickier as you work with it. So let me come over here and stamp this one. If you press really hard, you end up with more of the little gray image. And what I mean by that is that where the rubber meets the paper and is pressed, it pulls a lot of the paint off, and then you get sort of a raised paint around the edges. I really do like the look of the black on the white, but it's not like working with ink. And you really can't do too many of them in a row before you need to clean up, because it starts to thicken on your stamp. You need to clean up your stamp. So taking that baby wipe out, clean the whole thing up and start over. But I think it's worth it because it gives such a unique look. Anyway, I'll finish these up and go on to the next process. I have decided to be very simple in the way in which I put a border around the edge of the bookmark. So I'm using a Ranger white opaque pen or gel pen, white gel pen. And what I've decided to do on the back is just place the words "one of a kind." And I'm using just a yellow sticky, which I'm going to place right here. Placed on top here, I have my Tim Holtz ruler, which is great because you can see through it. But in this case, it's just going to help me to stay in the center. And I'm going to make sure that I think about the fact that I want my end to be underneath the center of the one. And I have found that with these pens, once they get going, you really can't backtrack too much. If you do it right away, you can go a little bit back, but you can't do that too far. Now see, this little sticky helps me to keep my eye on the vertical so that I don't start to wonk off sideways. So I'm not really touching it. It's going to look handmade and handwritten because it is. So I have one more word to do. See, so I'm not touching the paper, I'm just using it as a bit of a guide. Lovely in its imperfection. And everybody's doing those stitch marks and the chalkboard look and everything, so I said, alright, this is what I'm going to do. A dot in each corner. And then stitches. Kind of fun. Very simple. And truthfully, they actually look like real stitches, because if you've ever done this, again, because it's hand done, when you stitch, it's really hard to make every single stitch the exact same size. So, you don't worry about it. At first, I was being really picky. It was taking me a long time, but I am making, I don't know, 20 or 30 of these. And then I'm going to go back and do them in white, and I'll probably make the same borders. Maybe someday I'll pep it up and do something else, but after trying a bunch of different borders, I even tried having a stamp that had flowers all down here and then placing the pansies on the side, and I just didn't like it. I wanted the pansies to be the center of attention. So it turned out to be the simplest was the right thing to do. Alright, so I'm just going to finish off this last row. And then I'm just going in to each place, coming out from the dot, another line that's parallel to the lines I have, and one in the middle that can jet out a little. And it makes a nice little corner. So again, from the dot out, and the dot out, and one in the middle. And once you get the hang of it, and you're adjusted to the fact you're not going to have perfection, don't rush too much, but be satisfied. Okay. So now the front of my card is decorated, and the back of my card is, or my bookmark, is stamped already. It has my little one-of-a-kind. Really all there is left to do is place the pansies on. I found that having one a little bit high and just taking a look at the colors to decide where you want, I found that if I did have a color that was predominant up here, it was nice actually to repeat it there and just take one of the special faces, again, no perfection here, and put that in the middle. So slightly larger, and then these two sizes you can play with, a little bit of a match on either side, and it seems to create balance. You also want to remember that up at the top here you're going to put your eyelet when all is said and done, so leave a little extra room on the top. And then here's my favorite glue. I love this glue. Really, when you glue your flower, make sure that you're trying, at least attempting, to stay mostly on the part that's green, where the leaves are, so that you don't have it soaking through the petals. You don't need that much because we're going to encase the entire thing, and it'll be protected. Just a little dab of this glue will keep your pansies in place, and I would suggest that you let this dry overnight. If you can, take your time and give it a full dry. Where these were once living objects, there could still be a little bit of moisture, and the last thing that you want to do is encase the moisture when you go to laminate, because you could promote mold. So you have to keep in mind every time you are working with live things that they need a little extra special care, a little extra care when you handle them, a little extra care in how you work with them. And you should let your pansies dry overnight, even though it was hardly any glue, and this glue dries very quickly. It's really great glue. I am going to be leaving mine overnight just to make sure that there's no more moisture, and one more insurance that we won't have any mold problems once we seal it up. So now we just need to laminate. So my pansy bookmarks are ready to laminate. And the lamination sheets come with the peel off, and I chose not to use hot laminating in a laminating machine because the flowers have been through a lot already. They are were living, and they're very fragile, and I just don't think that they're going to handle well going through a hot laminating machine. The way that I have found that it's best to do this is to put them, you know, sort of like when you're making cards, down on the sides, and let them come down, and then gently do a little pressing. Now I have put it on the edge so that there's less cutting to do when I'm finished putting the lamination sheets on. You want to make sure that you're using your supplies wisely. So I found that I could put 5 of them if I spaced them just so. You want to leave enough space so that you can actually cut fairly widely outside. Now that we have the pansies placed on the first laminating sheet, I'm going to take the second one, and I actually want to start on the end that has extra, and I've peeled off just the skinny part, and I'll start the peel, loosen it up, and let that fall. And I guess the key is to try to get those corners to meet as best you can, so that when you stick it down and start moving forward with it, it rolls upwards. So I'm just going to seal this and fold that back and go in here to open up the paper, and then make sure it's flat. And then you really want to make sure, and I'm going to switch hands in a second, that you stick and roll. Maybe you can see how my hand is in there, and you keep pressing down as you're pulling the paper back, because all kinds of air bubbles and bending, and well, there can be a lot of issues can happen. So it's a little bit of a patience thing. Be patient with yourself. Go very slowly. Make sure that you're coming as straight across as you can. And again, I'm trying to show you, my hand is in there and I'm rolling my arm across as we go across. And then we got just that much left. There we go. Always thinking and pressing outward. And then again, from the center out in every direction, and you want to make sure that all of these edges are really pressed down well, and we'll be going over that and over that and over that to make sure. I like to take a paper towel or something smooth and really give it a good press in the back. And again, remember, you have to use some pressure, but these are flowers, and they break very easily. So hopefully when I turn them over, we don't see too much damage here. Give it a little press on this side. There we go. And now I'm using the tip of a brush, something nice and smooth. Make sure it doesn't have a jagged edge, or sometimes the little piece of wood is pointed, and that wouldn't work at all. You need something that's really smooth, and you do apply some pressure, but don't push too hard and tear your flower underneath or ruin your lamination sheet. So we're just sort of finalizing the encasing. And these did dry before I laminated them, at least overnight, even with just a little tip of a little bit of glue. There's moisture, and you have to keep in mind the whole time that you're working with the flowers, moisture is the enemy. You want everything as dry as possible, because these will be placed in books with live fibers, And if there's a little moisture, most likely there's something in there that would like to have a drink and grow. And if you give it some oxygen too, so here's what we're doing. We're sealing so that there's less oxygen. We're making sure that everything's extremely dry throughout the entire process, letting the flowers dry fully, not trying to do this before they are dried, letting the glue dry fully because there's water most likely in
Always
your
thinking
adhesive. From the center out. I'm not going to do the edges, which I will do, but I'm not going to do them yet. I'm just taking a piece of the protective cover of the laminate. I have the paper in my hand and I have it curled up, and I'm just really pressing not on top of the flowers but outward from the work I just did, just to give it a nice seal, a little bit of pressure, go around the whole thing. This may be overkill in some people's minds, but I want to make sure that they're done and hold up as best as possible. After all the trouble that I've gone to get these pansies this far, I want to make sure that they stay in their pretty little bookmarks. And
now,
use
the
them.
next part
Would be to do the same thing around the edges. So, coming up close, all the way around each of the bookmarks. And it's very important when we cut that we do not cut close, especially where we can see that there's a little bit of air and there's not contact between the two laminating sheets. So this, again, a little more insurance, a little more professional. This obviously is all done handmade and is not done by a machine, so it's not going to be as perfect, and it's not going to be the same as going through a hot laminating machine. But I have to tell you, I don't see too many live flower bookmarks around, and so I have to wonder, either people don't like them, which I think they're really pretty, or they're not that easy to do through a machine, and they're a little bit time consuming when you do them by hand. Now that I've gone around the edges, I'm just using a paper towel one more time to take advantage that things are now sticking a little bit more than they were when I first started the process. The flowers have all been gone around. The edges have been gone around the bookmark, and this is sort of a cleanup, and I'm not pressing hard right on the flowers themselves. You really can't get spectacular contact because they are natural fibers, and it's just not sticking the way it is to the processed fibers of the paper.
Cut.
And right here, for example, I'm going to be really careful to try and go right down the center, because I'm probably not going to cut too much more off of any of the sides, whether it's here or there. And I just want to get them out, and I'm leaving plenty of room around the edge. Worry about being picky afterwards. Cutting right down the center, just so I will be able to maneuver them better when I do the final cut, because no matter how hard you try, there's going to be a little bit. See that gap? You can't cut into that gap. When you cut, you have to cut over here, away from it. Second time around, you have to hold it up for yourself in a way that hits the light so that you can see how far from the area that is not touching laminated sheet to laminated sheet you can go. You do not want to go right against that area. You want to make sure that you can actually see, and as you can see, it's a bit of a space. You know, I'm not able to go right up against them. Otherwise you will lose the stickiness and most likely your seal, and possibly your flowers will come loose. And I don't know. The best care for these, by the way, when you're finished with them, is to put them in a book. You don't want to have pressed flowers, if you can avoid it, in direct sunlight. And there's nothing you can do to keep them forever permanent in the color. It's a temporary gift of nature to be able to see these colors. And then the last part, once I get all the edges cut, is to just go back and hit it with a curve, because these are actually kind of pointy and sharp. On the corners as well, you want to make sure that you leave that gap. Make sure you leave that gap. If I'm getting it for you. The space between where it's touching and where it's not. You want to leave a little bit on the corner too. Very important, because that would be the beginning of the end if the corner peels up and is not making contact. You can use another tool if you want to, but I really think that a crocodile or a big handheld tool of any kind could possibly cut too far on you, and this, although imperfect, gives you a little bit more control. So I'll finish these up and go to the next part. So I have actually finished off my bookmarks, and I'm not going to show you the grommet part. Come to think of it, I've never seen anybody do a video on putting these eyelets in. I called them a grommet. Maybe because it's loud. You have to hammer. But I did do some test runs because I was having trouble getting them in. Every time I use them, I have to relearn how to do so. The last step was simply to take some of these fibers that I have here. I love these. They're very soft. These are boa fashion knitting, and they're just so soft and really shiny white. And I decided not to get too fancy, keep the focus on the pansies, and just put these through. So I'm just going to, now that the eyelet is there, just going to put this through and pull that through the loop. And that's it. Just fluff it up a little. So there they are, the first completed pansy projects. I'm going to be doing some canvases. I am going to be doing some white bookmarks. There is a tutorial on using them on mason jars if you'd like to look through my playlists. I hope that you enjoyed watching this and that you will try your own pansies. So thanks a lot for hanging in with me and watching. Till next time, everybody, this is Kathy from Huckleberry Herbs and Art. God bless.